What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. My name's Andrew, and today's going to be another music theory breakdown. Today, we're going to be talking about Eiffel 65's song Blue. It's quite a throwback, and it is the Gabry Ponte Ice Pop remix. I believe it's the edit that we all know, or those of you that lived through the 90s definitely remember this track. So let's go ahead into the logic session. Here we are in my recreation. If you haven't seen a music theory breakdown before, basically what I've done is charted in all of the notes from the song that we hear and the drum grooves. I do that so that we can take a look at the MIDI, see what notes are used. I can talk about the scale where these notes come from. But my goal of this isn't to have the sounds completely accurate, because that would take me a little bit too long. And ultimately, I think in order to talk about the music theory, all we need to do is see the notes. So without further ado, here is my rendition of Blue. Let's actually throw my mastering chain on it just to get it a little bit louder. All right, here we go. Cool. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and hopefully it brings back some good memories. If you're not familiar with this track, this was a hit long before really electronic dance music was even a thing. This song was a huge success, and if you're not familiar with the words, like basically I'm blue, da ba dee da ba da. What's interesting about that, we'll talk about the theme and where we find that in the song. But before we do that, let's figure out where these notes come from. So over here I have our reference MIDI. So this song is in the key of G minor. What that means is we have the accidentals B flat and E flat. Everything else is a white key. Remember, if you have my music theory text, you'll know that A minor is our most basic reference key, or if you've seen my other videos. If I were to take this MIDI and drag it up, we would actually notice that we have all of the white keys. So that is our parallel key. So if you were to draw A minor and then drag that note, whatever wherever our first note ends up is that that minor key. So this is G, and we have G minor. Cool. So the chords we'll need for this song are the 1 G minor chord that has G, B flat, and D. We'll need the 7 chord that has F, A, and C. That's an F major chord. And then we'll need the 6 chord, which is an E flat major, which has the notes E flat, G, and B flat. Let's take a listen to this stuff. So that's the scale. Here are the chords. Nice. Now, we actually find this chord progression in lots of popular music. A song that comes to mind is All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan and more famously Jimi Hendrix as a cover, or Dream On, Aerosmith. It's a really cool minor chord progression. It's a 1-7-6. Sometimes in Along the Watchtower it goes back to the 7. So 1-7-6-7. Cool. So let's go ahead and look at the actual notes. So the song begins with this piano arpeggio, and essentially what we're hearing is the chords really softly. That's down here. That's that 1-7-6. The rhythm of the first two changes is on a half note. So we are at 128 beats per minute. That's a half note of G minor, then a half note, or really a dotted quarter of, what is that? The F major chord. And then we go to our E flat major chord, the 6, and we get there an eighth note early. And then finally we get the second repeat on the final half note of this 2 measure phrase. And this basically repeats every 2 measures. We get it 3 times in a row, and then at the very end, the chord progression doesn't change, but our arpeggio changes slightly. So I don't know if by the time you see this, my video Arpeggio Magic will probably be out, so check that out. It's all about arpeggios and some examples of where we find them. And I say in that video that this is one of the most common music compositional techniques, and this demonstrates that principle quite well. So the notes that we have are B flat, G, B flat. We find those as the 1 and the 3 of this G minor chord. Then we get C, A, B flat. The C and A are in this 7 chord. The B flat we've had in the first notes, that's in our G minor scale. It's also in the chord that happens in that moment. So I said that last 8th note, that's our E flat major chord. This is the 5 of the E flat, so that's where that comes from. And then finally, in the second measure of it, we get this fill that happens. The first 2 notes are really like the 3 and the 5 from the E flat major. They're also our 1 and 3 from our 1 chord. Then we do the scale run. C, D, that's a 4-5, 4-3-2 in the key of G minor. Just a melodic run. Cool, and then at the very end, we get the same first measure of arpeggios, and the second measure is different. Instead of doing the scale run that I just mentioned, we still go B flat, G, B flat, and then we do a scale run, basically just lower and then up, so G, F, G, A. Cool, I'll play that one more time while we look at this MIDI. Let's get it nice and big here so that you can see it. Cool, here we go. False start, here we go. Cool, so hopefully you enjoy that. I like that phrase a lot, or the melody. This arpeggio run is really melodic. Arpeggios and melodies have a lot of overlap. One thing I didn't mention is that I'm using sustain pedal automation. So whatever DAW you're using, you can find the MIDI automation line for the sustain pedal. So a sustain pedal is the rightmost pedal, also called in piano pedagogy called a damper pedal. And what it does is it makes the notes hold out for when the pedal is down. What's kind of weird to get used to is when this line is up, the pedal is down, meaning the effect is happening. When the line drops to the bottom, the pedal is coming up, meaning the effect is stopping. So when you're using the sustain pedal and you have a chord progression, typically you're going to want the sustain pedal to be on when a chord is happening and then come off before the next chord happens so that we don't get this clash of two chords at once. And again, drawing sustain pedal automation in, whether you're using a piano or really any instrument, virtual instrument, it can give a lot of cool smoothness. It basically makes all of this melody stuff a lot more legato, as we would say in music, or smooth and connected. Cool. Talking about the drums, we start with this crash sound that I basically spread out, and then I reverse for the uplifter. We get the full sequence of the 3 times of the pattern and then 1 of the change pattern. That happens twice. We get this up on the second eighth note, super common in house music for this closed cymbal. One pertinent thing is I'm using a delay, a super subtle dotted eighth note delay. Very, very, like literally virtually no feedback and very little signal. That just gives the hi-hat that little like pullback that it has in the original track. Cool. Moving along here, let's go talk about the drop. So the drop is pretty cool. I like it a lot. I'm using default Logic sounds for the bass instrument. I'm using this Agile synth bass. And what's interesting about it is it's basically just hitting the 1 note, so the G, and it's hitting on the same pattern that the hi-hats were hitting in the intro, or the second eighth note. What that does is that kind of is a manual sidechain, if you will. So the kick is a 4/4. It's hitting on every quarter note on the downbeat. And then the bass is hitting basically in the spaces between this and the eighth notes. So what I mean by manual sidechain is that instead of using a compressor to make the bass leave and create space for the kick drum, we basically wrote that in so that we get that combination. Let's hear that on its own. Cool, super simple. Then really in the original, or in this remix, the song we're talking about, this melody line is the vocal chop sound, the I'm blue, ba da dee da ba da, something like that. You may laugh. I perhaps have the syllables wrong, but it's I'm blue and then not words, then syllables. And it happens on the exact same arpeggio meets melodic pattern from the beginning. We could call that melodic pattern the theme. So what we hear in the beginning on the piano then is basically foreshadowing what's going to happen in the vocal chop. In the second half of this drop, we get that vocal chop layered with another instrument. So I did that, more of like a big synth sound. And then in the second 2/3 of this drop section, we get a really subtle chord happening in the background. You'll notice it if you go listen to the original. That's also happening on the second eighth note, the same pattern that the hi-hat was on, then the bass we just talked about. And now this is I'm using the Jupiter 8V3 from Arturia. Super cool instrument. Sounds very retro, just like the sound in the song, which is why I used it. And we are getting a G minor chord. The voicing is a little bit more open. So remember, with any chord, the notes that we have in the chord define the chord. So G, B flat, and D. And then where those notes fall, some high, some low, some repeated, that falls into what we would call chord voicing. So this voicing has G and then D, the fifth on the bottom, and then the B flat an octave above. Nice. Let's listen to the full drop section. Am I forgetting anything? The only thing probably left is I'm using this like weird pad pipe ambience. It's like a sound effect default to Logic to try to create the squeal that happens in the song. I'm also using a different Jupiter patch at the end of the drop to do the same thing. Let's hear this. Here comes that pipe ambience. This is that bigger lead section. We also have our hi-hats. And here comes a bigger lead section with hi-hats and claps. Nice. Let's talk about this second verse. So after the drop stuff that I just talked about, where we get the 4 on the floor kick, the hi-hat added, and then the hi-hat and the clap added with the lead building throughout, and that extra chord layer I just mentioned, then we get basically a 4, or I guess a 2 measure breakdown right here. That is a kick on half note pattern, our claps, and then this clap fill that happens at the end. Nice. And this is the second verse. We get vocals as well. This is a little bit of a darker section because it's holding on the 1 chord. So we're using the same bass essentially from the drop, that is the second 8th note G note. And then what happens at the end of the 2 measure phrase, so this is another thematic thing about this song, the patterns basically are presented in 2 measure groups. That's important because that provides some consistency that you notice whether you realize it or not. And at the end of this pattern, we get B flat, A, B flat. So again, notes from our key of G minor. That's the 3rd, 2nd, 3rd. And this B flat on the top is also one of our notes from our 1 chord. Nice. Then we finally get an extra piano layer in the second half of this verse. It's basically a 5th that's happening, where I'm using the 2nd chord, so the A and E, then B flat, A and E, so what are we doing? 2, 3, 2. So again, those 3 and 2 are in that bass fill, or the ending part that I just showed you, this section. And so those same notes happen on our piano, and that really creates some dissonance. So it feels clashing. That sense of clashing is part of what makes the final drop feel so good. Let's hear this section, and I'll play it all the way to this final drop. We don't need to talk about this section because it's actually identical to the big section before. So whereas the first drop starts with just kick drum, then kick drum and hi-hat, then kick drum, hi-hat, and clap, the second drop goes straight to it. So let's hear what that sounds like. Nice. Now, you probably noticed it. I didn't pick up on this at first. There's a little mistake right here. And instead of just deleting the video, starting over and fixing it, why don't we just show you what happened there? So I have a line of MIDI happening. And where the loop happens, essentially, wasn't consistent. So right here, our bass note gets off. So I need to zoom in here and make sure that this loop ends right in time, and then notice the bass notes go back into time. Snap it there. Cool. So anytime you're using loop features within your DAW, you just need to make sure that where the loop ends and begins is consistent with where it should be, or else you'll get what just happened where it's slightly out of time. Let's hear that fixed. Awesome. So hopefully that this all helped you better understand this song, and hopefully you enjoy the song as much as I do. So just to recap what we've talked about, we see every note that we found in the song is in the key of G minor. Every chord that we have in the progression is the G minor, F major, E flat major, that minor 1, major 7, major 6 progression. Then the main thing that happens, and part of why I think this is such a catchy song and a fun song, is that the main theme is presented to us in a bunch of different ways. Really cool, whether it's on the vocal or it's on the piano. And all of that stuff really helps us to better interact with it. So once you hear it once, if it repeats, then you better can anticipate what's going to happen in the music, which history will tell us human beings enjoy. So lots of songs that are popular have repetition in them. Then we saw a lot of the sort of slow building elements that would become are integral of electronic dance music, and specifically techno and house music. And again, this track was really kind of like unique in that it had a lot of success. It was an electronic track, but it was kind of before EDM was synonymous with pop music. So I hope you found this video helpful, and hopefully you better understand Blue by Eiffel 65. Once again, this is a really fun dance song, and regardless of what kind of electronic music you make, knowing historical tracks is always helpful. Hopefully this helped you to better understand G minor chord progressions and theme development. If you found this helpful, you would help me out a lot if you would subscribe to the channel. That'll be linked below. Also, if you're curious about my music theory textbook that I mention a lot, I'll also link to that below. Hope this was helpful. If you have any ideas for songs you'd like to see me break down, leave it in the comments, and have a great day. Talk to you guys later.